Tonight, I wanted to talk a little bit about Stockholm Syndrome because it's something that has been coming up a lot lately, and I've been reflecting a lot on that longing from certain people from the past and where it comes from and what kind of programming is behind that. And for me, it's of course, it's linked to mind control. It's part of the mind control. It's part of the programming that encourages us to trauma bound and to stay connected to things that are toxic for us. And we get kind of physical and emotional withdrawals from not being kind of looping into these very addictive types of dynamics in relationships. And there is a high degree of addiction in a lot of our relationships, and we might not be always aware of it. I think it comes with a process, layer after layers, to kind of notice when the body is really deeply engaged into some processes. And then we notice better the addiction of it, the hooks, where it gets us through our dopamine circuits. And a great percentage of our relationships work on that, and we're not always aware of it. But we might become more aware of it whenever we are faced with Stockholm Syndrome or that longing, because it indicates that there was like a highly addictive compound to the relationship. The way some very specific relationships work is that it tends to abuse our kindness or weaknesses. Any weakness can be an entry point. Some specific relationships work on with love bombing techniques, so it's gonna give you intermittently some good treatment, then kind of withdraw that, then kind of whenever it's necessary, give it to you again. Some people, they will show act of kindness, showering you with some affection, and it does produce hyper-aroused states. So it's not easy to navigate, and I find that relationships that are really not much triggering are easier to explore because you don't have these dopamine circuits that are constantly involved in it, and alters being triggered, and all of this happening. So there is an ambivalence towards these beings from our past, maybe because we might be missing them, and at the same time we might forget how hard it was to be with them, to be in their presence. So sometimes it's like our brain does dismiss a part of our past experience, only remembering some specific parts. And this also has to do with cover memories, so disguising what really took place and what was really happening in terms of handling, influencing, distraction. So all of that. And we tend to be longing for the thrill of that dopamine run dynamic. We also tend to dismiss maybe the things that were kind of concerning us or not so right? The things that were a little bit off maybe. but we do find ourselves missing someone who did abuse us, or who was not respecting our boundaries, right? Crossing the boundaries. And I feel it's often like a repetition of crossing the boundaries. And at a certain point, it's gonna tell you who these people really are, because it's something that, crossing the boundary a few times, but when it happens on a regular basis, or when people get really sent to trigger you by abusing your kindness, it does become a little bit of a problem. So all of these are frequencies that are of low caliber. Also, it has the frequency of lie, because love bombing is based on, if you wish, like false compliments. It's because the intent is to get something out of you later or right now. So the intent is not pure. And there is a difference from receiving a compliment that feels heartwarming, or something that just hooks right into you, and you're gonna feel it in your body somewhere. It just hooks in, and it trigger like a high. So all of this is very indicative of manipulative techniques going on. And it's some beings here have learned to do this way, because it's the only way they have found to kind of engage with others, because usually they are really cold inside. So they kind of find reassurance in creating this dynamic where they also feel alive. But they do have a lot of problems to have the other kind of normal, more balanced relationships. So for some people, it's a way of survival that they have found. They don't know any other more balanced way to do. And what we find is that we generally find a lot of excuses for these beings who are crossing our boundaries repetitively, because we want to believe in the friendship that we had. We want to, it's hard to really open your eyes to the darkness of maybe what was really going on. And something very important also is that we are very wounded, and sometimes we do accept the negative types of attention, because there is not a lot of positive one around, or it has to do also with that addiction that needs to be kind of stimulated, and the high that we get when we do get stimulated, and it's easier to function, but it's way more erratic. And we know it, a lot of our relationships are engineered. People are being brought to your life, usually not by accident. It's by a displacement of some parameter in the matrix, and bloop, 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 and up someone's appearing. And usually time is going to reveal the true nature of what was going on. So with Stockholm Syndrome, the term has been popularized after this very famous case where you had hostages in a bank, and they kind of bonded with their abuser. But this story is very well known and even cited by some of the celebrities. I've seen someone just mention this case of psychology, so it's very well known, and we can question the degree of truth in these false stories, and the oversimplification about what was really going on, and they don't really go to the root of mind control. It's kind of disguised into this psychology read, and to my sense it's a sort of simplified version explaining how an emotional connection was formed. They explain that as a form of survival, but it has more to do with trauma and distortion and despair. And so I feel that it's not understood in the depth that it is. And Stockholm Syndrome can have many different colors. It's not just one template. It's gonna be a little bit different. And I notice also that in all these stories about Stockholm Syndrome, there are a few famous ones. And if you look deeper, you're gonna see that these are inverted in their gender beings, and the signature is the one of disinformation and false operation, false stories being run everywhere. So if you study the signatures of these women hostage or things, you're gonna see that they are male to female. So the signature is interesting, and it brings us back to the hidden layers of control and engineering in our reality. So in the end, most of these stories that we hear in the media are false stories. They are there to simplify, so we never get to the root of mind control and hyperdimensional control, cross-dimensional happening, and it's all meant to limit the degree of what we are understanding, and also distort, because there is a great deal of distortion. So we find ourselves here in similar position of captivity, if you wish. I remember it was probably 3 years ago or 4 years ago. It was like probably the second time I was seeing the story of Julian Assange with one of their engineered storyline out there. And I kind of remember that I already had checked him in the past because they were already launching such operations, but I had forgotten that it's only kind of now that I remember, but at the time it was kind of a vague memory, and it was almost like the first time that I was seeing the name, and it instantly triggered very specific programming linked to martyrdom and attachment to such figures. It was a programming that I deactivated in the following 24 hours, so I was quite quick. But it was very interesting. In all of a sudden, a news was appearing in front of my eyes, and all this programming was kicking inside of me for someone that I just read a few lines about, and then it was generating all these things. So it was very interesting. And trauma bonding is a little bit similar in how complex it is and how wired deep inside our bodies it is. I had a similar strong attachment with a mind, someone who was pretending to be a survivor, a recoverer, someone who had recovered from, ritual abuse and radical mind control techniques being used on her. And she was appearing on a platform, on a platform of alternative information. But later on, I discovered that it was a nest of control opposition. And so was she. She was a false reintegrated victim, probably a male to female as well. And she was there also to generate very strong responses from her audience. And I was following the 4 hours. So it was a series of videos of 1 hour where she was sharing her testimony in some details, and it was really meant to generate that very intense reaction from the audience. And it did work. For me at the time, I was fascinated, and I researched, and I even reached out to her and kind of also participated a little bit to the narrative for a few weeks until I discovered that some things weren't really kind of pairing up, and I kind of the unease kind of grew on me. And then I could finally see through and kind of rewrite a different kind of articles. That's always how it goes sometimes. So for many of those things, for us, I feel it's good to not let things go too far too quickly, and because it's way more complicated when things are instilled in our lives, or whether it's because of someone we live with, we share space with, and then we share space for a long time. So it gets much more complex than to kind of take our time at the beginning, because the coding goes way more in when there is repetition and a high degree of intimacy. So it's quite complicated when we are dealing with beings who have little to no empathy, who are not caring about the well-being of others, because these ones are the ones who are more easily manipulated to serve the control agendas. But some of these beings are real and they are spirited. So they have, just as much as myself, the right and the connection to spirit, and the right to make their own experiment. But it becomes a problem because they are used negatively in the lives of others, and they are more easily manipulated because they don't have this empathy that kind of is its own kind of virus to the program. So these beings, they tend to trigger our deepest wounding of non-recognition, especially if they are spirited, because it hooks way more in than with the backdrops. The backdrop cannot hook so deep, except if they really make you believe that it's real. So yeah, what matters is for you to believe that it's real. And as soon as you believe that it's real, then you buy for all the layers of mind control that they have in store for you. So many are kind of used negatively to trigger, to slow down, to create a great deal of distraction. Some beings are especially used to hook to the heart chakra, to the heart energy center, and to collect energy. It's really a feeding, and they can be really convincing with kind of parts in them who are really programmed in a way that they will gain your sympathy, or that they will keep on accessing your heart because it looks so pure or so childlike, but it's really meant to provoke these heights and to hook into us. And then we can notice it with like addictive reaction, where we feel like we have no control, maybe in answering straight ahead or these kind of things. Or then we need to really do a great deal of effort to not react straight ahead. So we have usually also like alters that are programmed to fall for addiction and distraction. And all of that is helping the system to keep us in captivity, living in these captivity states. Now, the problem is with us, because there is a sense of comfort to live, to accept all of that, to get inside of our lives, because when we do, it's a distraction, an excuse where we don't have to do the work, we don't have to go for the unknown. And because going for the unknown, and it is asking much of us, much from us. And it is scary because there are a lot of fears to brave. So we have to be willing to keep on wanting to dismantle the delusional narratives. It means that we need to be confronting the magnitude of the exploitation that has been taking place here. And we're going to do that at our own rhythm, with things coming back to our memories. And it has to, it generally comes with a prolonged complex grief, because we realize that we have been living a romanticization, and it was a great part of it was a lie. So it asks from us to grieve the fantasy that has been only happening in our mind, because the reality of things has been different. The intentions were different than the ones that we perceived. And it's usually also quite hard to feel with the discard part, where whether we are the one putting the first steps in action, whether we are the one to decide this can no longer go. Even if we do, there will still be that discard part where it's like the mind of the person is discarding you and judging you and putting you in a small box because you didn't behave the way it was expected, a way that was really demanding and controlling. So you are kind of discarded and put in a small box that is really a limitation. And it's only going to be annoying if you believe that this limitation is true. But it is sad because you were thinking that you were building something, and then it kind of all collapses, and it kind of reveals the true cement that was there. And it's a cold, sharp truth for sure. So it just shows that not much of this was true. It was mainly engineered. And when the engineering is being revealed, there is not much solid standing strong. But there are many places where there is this solidity. There are many places where there is a sense of reciprocity to a certain extent, and there are many different levels where reals are. Some have not much memory, so it kind of is really complex, because you want to bond with others that are real, that are kind to you, that appreciate you, but there is this programming that is in the way because of the levels you are at, right? So it's gonna come in the middle of even good relationships, which can be a sad aspect of this reality to deal with, because in some ways you would like to connect on deeper terms, but not all reals are ready. Actually, many reals are just broken, just a little spark dying, totally under mind control, with not much memory. But I mean, some are great individuals, good-hearted, and when in touch with them, I can feel that it's cleverly designed, because it's designed this way, where programming will come between you and them, due to different layers of programming that are going to kick in. So it's really an art to kind of be yourself without demeaning yourself, without playing small, but without also putting other people in discomfort. So it's really an art to find the right balance with all of that. And I find that it's possible, it's doable. And when it happens, it just feels good. It feels elevated. It feels like everyone has been making the right choices, and it's a victory. So it's definitely possible. And there is so much beauty and richness all around that is sometimes hard to tap into because of all the programming that prevents us to see. And on a good day, you can see the richness of the life around you. But on some not so good day, it might be more difficult. It might be a little bit more difficult. Yes, it might be a little bit feeling like a dead hand, or like that there is not so much richness, but there is. So sometimes it's a matter of dragging ourselves until the next good day and processing all this Stockholm Syndrome, all these triggers deep inside the body, to kind of reinstall the truth and focus on what is really healthy and what is real love, and not that kind of distorted love that is built on you being captive from mind control and under control. There are these people who mainly love you when they can keep a sense of control over you. But what kind of really strange kind of love is that? Isn't it? And I feel that if we could remember the frequency of what was happening at that very moment, it's because we forget about that heavy frequency of control happening. And we embellish things in our own memories, in our own mind. But if we could remember, we could really celebrate the sense of relief that we have to have made courageous choices for ourselves, and to make the courageous choices to create space in our life, because we know that in that space that we are creating for ourselves, there lies many rewards that we have no idea how big they are right now, because we need first to take the steps before, and then only later we understand and we kind of get the gratification from our own choices, our brave choices. And that's how it goes. We have to take a leap of faith to make the courageous choices to say no more to layers of abuse that we are aware of, because there is always more abuse going on that we are aware of, but working on these that we know, that we really feel a disease, an unease in them, and make a courageous choice to say, this is not going to happen like it was happening in the past. This is where I put the boundaries. And then you will see, do people still love you with your boundaries? Or do they get offended? Was it a conditional type of contract? Or was it not? Is it able to survive and grow? Is it able to look back and analyze what's been happening? Is it able to bravely kind of talk about the meta context of all of what is happening? I find way many two people are I find it's always interesting when individuals really don't want to talk about the processes and the messing ups. We have to talk about all of that. It's part of these processes. It's gonna also kind of bring shame and these kind of things. It is part of the process, but we have to be brave enough to go beyond these heavy layers. And much of the shame comes from actually engineering, all this engineering. It's engineered to put you in this shame. So this shame, this low frequency shame, stick with you for a while. It's cleverly done. So let's keep on finding the keys and be really smart and wise about how we navigate all these complex processes within our own selves, especially with all the triggers within the body, within the mind, within the psyche, exploring when someone is sort of triggered to send a message that has specific consequences. Maybe we allow again things that are not so good for us in our realities. Maybe we doubt ourselves. We give another chance. But I feel after a repetition of attacks and kind of twisted triggers, there comes a time where it's time to make another choice. And I believe that when you close a door and say, I'm not gonna waste my precious time with this unwillingness and this constant abuse, then I feel it's an invitation for the program to send you new versions that are at least a little bit friendlier. It's really about what we will accept to let in our realities. And I very much believe in that. And I'm seeing the improvement in my reality. Now there is always a lot of homework, and it's never easy, but it's never light. It often has this heaviness from the programming. That's the programming that is so heavy. So it is program designed this way, that even the more agreeable relationships here are sometimes with this complexity and this heaviness from ourselves being such complex beings. So I think paying a lot of attention to these negative types of attention is really, really important. And paying attention to this addictive pattern as well. And it's gonna help us to keep on being aware, wise, and to dismantle what needs to be dismantled and to reinstall healthier models about relating and how close we want to relate to each other, and tuning into all that is necessary and welcomed.